your friendly neighborhood author, Jonathan, and you are listening to Season 4 of the Floor Rejects podcast, The Wells House Phenomenon. Well, this is as good as we're going to get. Hi, it is Jonathan from the Floor Rejects podcast, your friendly neighborhood reader, writer, journalist, podcaster, really depressed insurance appraiser here. We're here for Chapter 4 of the Wells House Phenomenon, a brief synopsis of the last chapter. Mostly just Warren getting to know the people around him, these Thomas and Lila, his new employees, or his employees. So Chapter 3 was him getting to know them. Chapter 1 was just basically setting up the family. Chapter 2 was him kind of reflecting on his grandparent or his grandfather and everything that kind of led up to him getting there and meeting Thomas and Lila. And Chapter 3 was his first of many nightmares. He had his nightmare, he woke up, he had dinner with the duo, really enjoyed himself too much to the point where he had to have Thomas help him out to the trailer. And when he slept in there, he was passed out, didn't dream, didn't have an issue, woke up, vomited on everything, decided he was going to take a shower in his new bathroom. And when he did, he saw a figure, the same figure we assume that he saw in the nightmare that he had in the last chapter, but he can't remember it. So he sees this figure in the bathroom, he freaks out, he gets changed, he kind of has breakfast and tries to be normal with Thomas and Lila. Then his phone rings, his new vehicle is being delivered, he has to go down there and meet them at the gate, and he's not upset about it because he doesn't want to deal with Thomas and Lila. So he goes down there, and instead of coming back up after all of that, he just leaves. He decides, let me spend the day away from the house. It's been a little bit much. There's nothing in the rules that says I can't do that. So that's what he does. And that's where we left off, was him getting to the mall, parking in the parking lot, and that's where Chapter 3 left off. So without further ado, Alexa, it's podcast time. Alexa, it's podcast time. Chapter 4, Awake by Night. Warren fought the urge to buy everything he saw, remembering he still had 363 days until his next paycheck, and instead purchased only a small wardrobe. He ended up with 5 pairs of pants, at least a dozen shirts, underwear, socks, new shoes, and all the odds and ends that he hadn't managed to fit in his backpack. While he was in the mall, he picked up a new phone, having all of his data and information switched over while he waited at a nearby coffee kiosk. He was excited to have all of his new clothes and his new phone, but he decided he would also pick up something nice for Thomas and Lila, except he didn't know what they would like. All he really knew was that Lila liked red, and Thomas, he didn't like anything that Warren knew of. So Warren, with a few minutes left until his phone was done, wandered into a luxury boutique, looking around for the inspiration of a gift for people he barely knew. He spotted a set of chamomile-scented lotions, bubble bath, and candles. He picked this up for Lila, knowing that candles and lotions were a safe bet from years of shopping for gift baskets with his mother as a kid, and at a price of nearly $200, he hoped he was betting right. Thomas has him stumped, though. In the past couple of days that they had known each other, there wasn't a hint of interest or passion that Warren could wrap his head around to narrow down a gift idea. He purchased a set of candles and lotions, has it wrapped up, and as he heads back to get his phone, he spots in the display of a small outdoor store a gleaming Swiss Army knife. He wasn't sure why it caught his attention, but there was something about it that made him turn about face. He walks into the store, and when he asks the clerk about the knife, the man gives him a patronizing smile, explaining that it was an antique and over $500. Warren hands him his debit card without blinking, and as the man swipes it, he asks, with just as patronizing a smile, if they offer gift wrapping. He may have wanted to escape his family in the way that they let money rule their lives, but if he could use it to knock uppity store owners down a couple of pegs, he ventured that maybe money wasn't quite the evil he thought it was. His drive back was uneventful, save for his stop at the same McDonald's from the day before, and when he arrived back at the front of the house, he saw his grandpa's truck, now parked next to the trailer so that the door couldn't be accessed, and he made a note to ask them where the keys were so he could move both vehicles somewhere he could get them cleaned up. He wanted to preserve the trailer and the truck, feeling nostalgia and warmth every time he looked at them. Walking through the front doors, he's greeted by the sight of Thomas's legs sticking out from under the large red couch tucked under one side of the front stairs. He's kicking around, grunting and struggling with something, and cursing under his breath. He doesn't hear Warren walk in, but after a moment, as Warren sets his bags down, Thomas flips over onto his belly and begins shimmying out from under the piece of furniture. As he gets some leverage and up onto his knees, he begins to carefully maneuver his top half out, being careful not to bump his head. This gives Warren a chance to savor the visual of Thomas's slight, but certainly not non-existent backside, as it wiggles its way backwards. Just as his t-shirt lets loose a peek of a tight, flexing lower back, Lila's voice peeks from the top of the stairs. "Warren, I'm glad to have you back. You left in such a hurry we weren't sure when we were going to expect you," she says with a confused look as she watches Warren's eyes snap from the display in front of him. Lila's voice startles Thomas, and he smacks his head on the ornately carved wooden edge of the couch, and he hisses. Warren moves towards him, but Thomas waves him off. "Yeah, sorry, the delivery guy was really impatient, and I didn't want him taking my car back to the dealership. Have you guys been busy today?" Warren asks, bending down to pick up the 2 gifts from his pile of stuff. Yes, I was cleaning all of the upper floors, hoping to get you up here soon to do a survey of the space. We like to do that every so often with the owners. Isn't that right, Thomas?" Lila asks. Thomas grumbles in response, still rubbing the back of his head. She makes it to the bottom of the stairs, and Warren smiles at her, extending her present. "I got you guys presents while I was out, just to show you I appreciate how welcome you've made me feel." Lila clutches at her neck in surprise, putting the massive box on the large marble table in the center of the hall. Warren walks over to Thomas, extending a hand to hoist the man up, and handing him a smaller box with a pat on the back. The pair open them together, Lila delicately pulling at the ribbons wrapped around hers, while Thomas ripped into his packaging, earning a look of dictate from his mother. He opens the box all too quickly, and before Warren can say anything, he watches the knife tumble from the box, and with reflexes he didn't know he had, he reaches out and snatches it midair, placing it in Thomas's palm. The blond man looks at it, befuddled for a second before his eyes grow wide. "You're a hard nut to crack, but someone who works with his hand as much as you do, I figured you would appreciate it. Apparently it's an antique. It's a limited edition," Warren begins before Thomas finishes his sentence. "It's a World War II, 1945 Swiss Army knife. I remember," Thomas says, and Warren steps back a beat, shocked at how on point his gift-giving had been. Thomas looks down, almost foggy-eyed for a moment, and shakes his head, letting his emotions boil down. "I remember seeing this knife in a magazine for collectors a while ago. I can't accept this. It's way too extravagant," Thomas says, and Warren smiles and assures him it's perfectly acceptable for him to take it. Thomas smiles, now a second genuine smile that Warren counts as a win as Lila takes in a deep, shocked breath. "Oh, Master Wells, this gift it's lovely. How kind of you. this is so splendid." Her reaction seems genuine, if not a little bit overplayed, as she rushes over to Warren, hugging him tightly. He stands stock still, so uncomfortable that when she lets go of him, he has to swallow a sigh of relief. "Well, I might head upstairs and use these right now. Dinner's in the oven. I'll have Thomas come and fetch you for dinner, if that's okay," Lila says, clutching the large box to her breast. Warren nods, gathering up his bags, to the protest of Thomas, who is insistent he should carry them, and heads to his room. He folds all of his new clothes, putting away the new toiletries and personal items, and then, careful not to get too sleepy again, remembering the strange feeling he had the day before when he woke up from his nap, he ventures back out into the hall, turning for the first time to his left and opening the next door over from his. It turns out to be an office, a rather large and imposing office that puts the one in his mother's house to shame. Floor-to-ceiling bookcases are built into every available wall, with the only free space being the back wall covered in a large portrait of the original Wells house owner, a huge executive desk in front of it. Warren walks around the room, running his fingers over the dusty shelves, scanning the spines for anything that looked interesting. He spots a section of books that looked less dusty than the rest, a set of about 10 matching volumes running along a bottom shelf in the corner, and Warren walks towards them, reading the names of his ancestors, one per book, starting with the original Wells and extending to a book with virtually no dust, with his grandfather's name on the edge. Next to it was a blank book that matches the rest, and Warren knows somehow that this one is meant for him. As he reaches his grandfather's tome, he hears the door open. "Dinner's ready, Warren," Thomas says quietly, his body blacked out by the hall light. Warren can feel a memory tug at the back of his mind, but he shakes it off and stands, making a note to ask Lila about the books. Dinner is a casserole filled with richly seasoned chicken, cheese, served with green beans and mashed potatoes. Warren is stuffed by the end of it, careful this time not to drink it all. And when she offers coffee and cake, he obliges, and they head into the kitchen to sit at a small nook with a more intimate table. The crumb cake is moist, and the coffee only succeeds in keeping Warren more alert. They discuss the manor mostly, Lila explaining that there are several abandoned outbuildings where she thought they could park the truck and trailer, but Warren insists that it be pulled around somewhere with a spigot so he can wash it first. She tells him that if he wished for it to be clean, that Thomas would be happy to do it. She also explains that the books he had seen were just tax records by owner, and that the new book was indeed for his future returns and documents. In the middle of their conversation, Warren's phone randomly lights up on the table, a text from an unsaved number. Warren clicks on it without thinking, and a photo pops up of a headless torso, with shorts pulled down to reveal a patch of black hair. He fumbles with the phone, shutting it off quickly before he thinks Lila sees it. Thomas, he's not so sure. He was pretty sure it was Ted, the guy that had been in his bed when his mother called to tell him about his grandfather. The chest looked familiar. He pockets the phone, and Lila excuses herself, telling the men she was ready to sleep. Thomas nods and stands as well, cleaning up some dishes as Lila leaves. "So, Thomas, would it be okay if I clean the truck and trailer myself? I just don't want you to waste your time on something trivial. I'm sure you have more important stuff to do," Warren says. Thomas shakes his head, speaking down into the sink as he scrapes a plate. Warren, it's my job to do these sorts of menial chores. If you do all the outside work, I won't have anything to do with my days," Thomas says, and Warren smiles into his cup, walking over to lean against the sink. "Well, would it be okay if I helped? I just miss my grandpa, and I want to save what I have left of him," Warren says, and Thomas looks up at him, smiling. "He was a really kind man. I understand why you want to keep his memory alive. I'll start on them tomorrow morning around 9. Join me whenever you like," Thomas says, and Warren nods, pushing into the hallway and retiring to his room. As he crawls under the sheets, clad in nothing but his briefs, he feels a little more settled and less chaotic than he had the day before. He hears Thomas's footfalls pass by his room a few minutes later, and then, as soon as he flips the light off, his eyes are shut and his mind is quiet for a moment. Another dream comes to Warren this night, less menacing than the night before, that he couldn't remember. On the second night, he's back in his room, unaware he is dreaming, and the main door opens. Lila walks through, staring at him intensely. He can move this time, and he sits up, pulling his duvet up to cover his bare chest. "Lila, what's wrong?" Warren exclaims, and Lila smiles, her floor-length black dressing gown drawn loosely around her waist. She draws closer, and Warren scoots towards the edge of the bed away from her. "Don't be worried, Master Wells. I'm just here to see if you have any last requests before I retire to my room," she explains. Warren looks around quickly, gathering his dream-addled brain. No, I'm fine," he says. She steps closer, a hand now on the bed. "Are you sure?" she asks, one knee raised up and sinking into the bed. Yes, I am." Warren's voice shakes as Lila draws her other leg up, resting on her knees next to him. Warren's mind is spinning, but the dream has it spinning back and forth and not able to complete any of his thoughts. "Well, I am here to take care of your every single need, Master Wells," she says, drawing a circle on his chest with her delicate pointy nail. Oh, okay, Lila, what are you doing? He asks as the room around him shimmers and he starts to realize he was in another dream. Just making sure you're comfortable, Lila says, drawing herself up and sliding a hand over his shoulders. He shivers involuntarily, and her nails graze his skin lightly. Just as she slides a leg over his lap, and he gets ready to slither from the side of the bed away from her, her head snaps to look at the space behind him. Get out, she hisses, and Warren whips around only to come face to face with a shadowy, marred face and the patterned wallpaper next to his head. He yelps in fear, his body bucking as Lila reaches out, swiping at the face. Leave! She yells, jumping from the bed and springing towards the wall. Arms skinned in the same brocade-covered wall and reach through it, gripping her by the sides of her head, pulling at her hair and yanking her towards it. She wails, fighting blindly at the figure. Warren is paralyzed in fear, and when Lila's voice is silenced as her head is pulled through the wall somehow, everything goes black. Warren's mind is blank again, and as he opens his eyes, the memory of the dream fades again before his vision can even focus, only the dull sense of dread left behind. He can't tell what time it is first, since there are no windows, only wall draperies where windows should be, and when he taps his phone, he realizes it's the next morning. He groans, rolling from the bed and taking a steaming shower before plodding into the kitchen to find Lila plating biscuits straight from the oven. She looks up at him, smiling, sliding a warm coffee mug to him as he sits at the table and looks out the window. Good morning, Warren. How did you sleep? Well? She asks, her sunny demeanor piquing that same feeling in the back of his mind like he's forgetting something. I don't know. I think I had another nightmare, but I can't remember, he says. Lila sits a plate of steaming eggs and biscuits in front of him. Probably a good thing. Nightmares are best forgotten. They don't teach us anything, she says, and Warren notices her hair is pulled into a severe bun at the top of her head. He doesn't say anything because he doesn't think it suits her, but it wasn't his business. He glances out the window again and sees movement in the driveway. Thomas pulls the truck and trailer around the back of the house, and from his view, he watches Thomas unreel a hose, fill up a bucket, and begin to soak down the truck. The sun is already beating down on him, his tight white tank top already dark around the armpits. He's a quiet soul. Sometimes I think he lives just to work out in the sun, Lila says, settling in across from Warren with a cup of tea. I've noticed that's kind of how I remember my grandpa being. He always wanted to do something. He didn't care about talking that much. It was like pulling teeth to get him to open up, Warren says, and Lila laughs, agreeing that Thomas was much the same way. Warren watches as Thomas accidentally soaks the front of his shirt, the cloth steaming in the cool spring air. He appears to say something to himself before peeling the shirt off, revealing his lean, narrow torso. Warren looks away quickly, blushing as he stares down into his mug. Lila takes notice, looking out the window, then back to Warren. When he looks back up at her, she masks her expression. He takes his cup to the sink and excuses himself. He isn't sure if there's a back door yet, so he walks out the front and around the back, forcing himself to keep his eyes pointed up as Thomas looks over at him, his alabaster skin glistening with sweat and his lean, sinewy muscles bouncing as he slaps down his soapy towel. Here to join me, Warren? Thomas asks, his voice surprised and a small smirk peeking out. Warren nods, grabbing a second towel from the bucket and soaps up the other side of the truck. They don't speak much, only a peppering of questions from Warren about the property as the two of them work their way around the vehicles. When the exteriors are completely clean, Warren turns to Thomas, who's still shirtless, bent over the coiled hose. Where should I park this that's out of the way? He asks the blonde, and Thomas looks around and then shrugs and points towards the back field. There's an old barn down the hill. It's got a gravel path out there, not too far out, but it's covered, he says, and Warren nods, climbing back into the truck cab. Thomas hops into the bed as Warren drives carefully, scanning for the gravel road. When he spots it, they grind down the hill towards an old, black-painted barn, and Thomas jumps out as they draw near, throwing the doors open as Warren drives in. He shoots him a two-finger salute as he drives through, and Thomas smiles a little more genuinely than he had yet. Warren bounds out of the barn, excited to have his only nostalgic memories tucked away safely where he knew he could access them. They walk back up to the house, the sounds of the gravel grinding under their feet rhythmic and soothing. When Warren turns to part ways, he claps Thomas's shoulder softly. The man looks down at his hand, almost alarmed. Warren lets go quickly, upset that he'd overstepped so easily. Do you mind if we don't tell your mom? I'd rather keep this between us, Warren says, kicking himself because he knew how this sounded. Yes, that's fine by me. Your house, your rules, Thomas says, pulling his now sun-dried shirt back on. Thanks, man, Warren says, walking back to the front porch and pulling a cigarette from the pack in his pocket. The nicotine swirls around his brain in the warm sun as he basks in the afternoon rays on a stone bench by the railing, and just as he's about to ash onto the mulch, Lila appears with a crystal ashtray. Here you are, Warren. We have plenty around the house, and extras if you need one, she says, and Warren laughs. How are you everywhere? He asks. It's my job to make sure you're comfortable, she says nonchalantly, and again he feels the niggling at the back of his thoughts as she retreats into the house. Staring out over the rolling hills in front of the house, Warren is at peace. He worries for a moment that maybe he was too willing to give up all his relationships and responsibilities, but he had never been a person that needed to be constantly around others, and he was all too happy to sit alone in a room with his phone or a good book and not speak to another person all day. The sun sets as he finally finds himself slowly working through the pack, sitting in silence with his thoughts, only speaking briefly to Thomas when he heads back into the house, and Lila when she brings him a glass of lemonade after she noticed his long absence. That night at dinner, he spoke to his glorified roommates a bit more, willing Thomas to come out of his shell, if only to avoid having to look into Lila's eyes, as there was something about them that continuously sparked a nervous feeling in him. They retired to the kitchen again for dessert, the dark cherry cabinets and speckled marble countertops making him feel a bit warmer. The room was dark, and when he first arrived, the darkness of all the rooms in the house was off-putting, but he was growing accustomed to it, and when they sat in the warm, dim light of the room, he found himself picturing the coming days, sitting around with these two, lulled into the comfort and security that had been left to him. After dessert, Warren returned to his room, feeling sleep pull at his eyelids. He gives in quickly and is dreaming again in his bed with the door creaking open just like the last time. He remembers the previous dreams, and now, scooting up in the bed, more confused than he was when he couldn't remember his dreams, Lila peeks into the room. "Hello, Master Warren. How are you doing this evening?" she asks, and Warren tries to muster a genuine smile. He's unsure exactly what's going on, and he is aware that Lila is just a figment of his imagination, but all the same, she still looked and seemed real. Yeah, Lila, I'm fine. Just heading to bed." He tries to keep his voice even, and as she steps further into the room, he fights the urge to back away from her. "Is there anything I can help you with?" she asks, following her exact actions from the night before. "No, I'm all good," he says, and she pouts as her hand draws up on his shoulders. She hikes a leg up, straddling him loosely and grabbing his hand. He wants to slide out of his skin, the feeling of her sickly, smooth skin against his making his heart beat erratically. She examines his cut, clicking her tongue. "Warren, this looks painful. Is there anything I can do to make it better?" she asks, leaning forward. Warren leans back, turning his head to the side. No, please, Lila. I just want to sleep," he says, and she freezes, and he can feel a quiet rage radiate from her. She leans back, standing from the bed and straightening her dressing gown, her red hair almost luminescent as she walks quietly towards the door. Warren finds it odd how this dream was playing out, especially now that he was aware he was dreaming. "Maybe next time, Master Wells," she murmurs dejectedly, gliding out of the room quietly, the door shutting behind her. Warren sits in shock, wondering why his mind would conjure this setting, why he would unconsciously bring himself here to this state. He was still in shock, waiting in silence, wondering how to end the dream, and wondering if he had that control. He decided that while he was in this mental fugue state, he would do some exploring. He climbed from the bed and snuck out of his room, down the hall and another back to the main entrance. He stands and listens quietly, hearing a low moaning sound coming from somewhere in the house, and he narrows in on the second-floor landing. He hadn't gone upstairs yet, feeling that it wasn't really his domain, even though it technically all was. He reaches the second floor, seeing a long hallway running the entire length of the house from the landing at both ends. He creeps towards the sound, his bare feet scuffling on the runners as he listens at each door he comes to, drawing closer and closer with each door. Finally, at the end of the hallway, at a door that's marred by bright yellow scratches and marks, as if someone was clawing at the edge of it, he listens closely at the crack, hearing the moaning echoing from within. He reaches down, slowly turning the knob, clenching his teeth, willing it to turn silently. As it reaches the end of its rotation, it clicks. The wailing stops abruptly, and frenetic shuffling replaces it. Just as Warren feels the doorknob turn the opposite way by someone within, he senses movement from the landing. Thomas stands, wearing only a pair of white boxers and a look of shock, in the moonlight from the entrance hall. He takes a half a step forward as the door rattles in Warren's hand when he begins to step away. They both freeze, Thomas only uttering a small, "How?" before everything goes black and Warren feels himself drifting weightlessly in the ether. Okay, we're back. So, we've read chapter 4 now. Here's some interesting things I'll just point out, because when you're reading, or I guess you're not reading it, when you're listening to something, you don't always have a chance to pick up on everything. So one of the things that we find out is when Warren is dreaming, he can remember the dreams that he's had in the past, but when he's awake, he doesn't remember them. We don't know yet if that extends to changes in his environment while he's awake or not. But generally, I think we can agree that the changes, he will register them at least in the dreams, and then can kind of piece that together as he goes along. We also get a little more interest from Thomas. You know, he's got a little more personality now. He expressed a little bit more interest in the Swiss Army knife than I think Warren was expecting. I think it's interesting that he said, "I remember." Just me dropping a lot of not very subtle hints. But I like this chapter. I like that I'm kind of getting better at my pacing, and that every chapter doesn't have to be a day, but it also doesn't have to be that one chapter spans an entire month. Because we're 4 chapters in that span 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 days, but that's just setting up the story. So once we kind of get into it, then we'll have a little bit more to go off of. I like, one of the things that I do like is the way that Lila kind of employs what she calls Warren depending on the situation. When she's a little bit more sensual, it's Master Wells, you know, giving this inclination, this what's the word I'm looking for? Giving us sort of an indication of subservience, but she tries her best to call him Warren during the day. I like that Warren isn't sure, you know, he's kind of like, this is a figment of my imagination, but at the same time, I'm still not comfortable with what's going on here as far as Lila coming in and being very forward with him. Again, I don't think I'm the most clever at disguising what it is I think that the story ends up being based around, what sort of creature or legend that this is based around. I think you probably already know what it is, so it's not a big deal. I'm not going to say it in case you don't. But I think it's fun and interesting and quirky and wild. And I just realized you can see my tool bag behind me, and I'm not going to fix it because you're currently mounted to my window with a selfie light, because the webcam I bought specifically for this podcast, the video version, looks like garbage. So we're going to see if using my phone is better. I don't love it. It's probably not as good for the audio. As you can see, you're down here, and now I got to put you up here and scrape you on the thingy. But I like this chapter. I do notice the more that I read stuff and the more I try and read it and never mess up, that I repeat words when I write sometimes, or I repeat sounds. So like I'll use the word peak as in to peek around a corner, and then the word peak as in the tallest part of a mountain or the height of something. in the same couple of sentences. While they're two different words, it is something I try and get away from, and somehow I do it. And I think that when you're reading something, it is very different than listening to a story being read, because when you're reading it, your eyes register that it's a different word. And so while it may sound the same in your head, it's not quite the same as hearing someone say peak and peak, or there and there, or loose and lose. They're very similar words and they sound similar, but when you're reading them, you realize just how different they are. And I'd like to get away from that. Now, let's move on to some other business. As far as Warren, I like that he's showing a little bit of, not like care for the people around him, but he is realizing that he has to be a little more pragmatic and that he does need to build some sort of relationships with the people in this house, just because he doesn't really have any other option, because he's stuck with them. I do like that the narrator just calls them glorified roommates, because that's basically what they are. They're all roommates in this house, him living there because it's free and them living there because it's free, and all they have to do is work. So I like this chapter. I say that every single time. I like that when it comes to Thomas, because we know that Warren is gay. He said he's gay. He's queer. He is a gay man, and I like that when it comes to Thomas, he can appreciate the parts of him that he finds attractive while simultaneously not really being attracted to him, because number one, gay men are kind of painted as predatory by, society, more conservative society. Like, we're preying on every single straight man that there is, when that's just not the case. It's really not. No offense to you straighties. But I like that he can kind of independently separate the fact that Thomas is male and that he's putting some of these things on display, if he's realizing it or not, and then snapping out of it and being like, I'm not really even attracted to him. We've seen so far the only person he's expressed attraction to that is, described at all in the story is an older man, and that will come into play later. It will for sure, and we'll see it come into play. And I like that in the dream, we're not sure, it's a dream, so in theory, if Warren is dreaming, the Lila and Thomas that he's seeing in his dream are not real. But I like that in his dream, they are acting kind of independently. Like, Lila just leaves the room, and then Thomas just appears. Like, if it was Warren's imagination, he's kind of self-aware that if this was his imagination, things wouldn't be playing out the way that they are, which is why he's so confused. Even though he can remember the dreams that he's having when he's asleep, he's not really sure what's going on, because if you're having a dream and you're in control of it, you would think you would make it something more appealing to you. So even if it wasn't like his ideal man walking through the door, it would at least be Thomas, not Lila. But Lila walks through the door both times, or all three times. It's starting to get hard to remember exactly what happens. But then there's also the interesting thing of this shadowy figure, which I did mess up a little bit when I was reading it, and I'm not going to re-record it. But the shadowy figure appears in his second dream as part of the wallpaper. And because I messed up on it, and I don't think I can do it justice reading it just with my voice and my skills, I wanted it to be scary and creepy, the imagery of a body reaching through this intricate brocade on the wall, reaching through, grabbing Lila and pulling her back through. I wanted it to be scary. And I think when you read it, when you're reading it in your head, when someone else is not reading it to you, and you're kind of in your own mind creating that situation in your mind, and you put yourself there, it's a lot more scary than listening to someone else read it, and especially listening to someone like me read it who is not... I'm not like a narrator by trade. I don't read audiobooks for a living. I just do the best that I can, and I think I'm getting better at it. But that's what I really like about this chapter. I'm working on the supplemental Sims content if you do watch the video version of the podcast, or if you listen to the audio version and just want a little something fun to watch. I make the characters in The Sims, and I'm making the Wells Manor kind of bit by bit as we discover rooms. This next video, I think, is Warren's bedroom, bathroom, the little closet that you walk through to get to the bathroom from his room, and then the office, which he discovers the office in this chapter. And really, I'm just kind of combining a couple of chapters because those Sims videos they easily take about 10 hours each to edit and upload. And that's without taking the 2 hours to build on camera, and then another couple of hours to do the commentary and cut the commentary down. So I'm kind of just combining a few chapters. I'm not going to be able to do a Sims video and an audio podcast and a video podcast every single week. So maybe every other week I can do a supplemental Sims video. But we've got 2 up so far, the creation of Warren, and then the second one, or I guess 3. No, 2. 2 or 3. 2. Yeah, 3. Yeah. Sorry, I was really trying to think about it, and I'm a little flustered. It's late, and I still have a lot to do. But we've got the video of Warren's creation. We've got the video of Thomas and Lila being created, as well as the sitting room and kind of the basis of the entrance hall that he walks into in chapter 2 when he meets them. And then we've got the third video, which I'm working on editing right now, which is the bedroom, bathroom, closet, and office. And in this chapter we just read, of course, we discovered the office with Warren and kind of the kitchen. And I think I built the dining room as well. Yeah, the dining room was built as well. Some of the rooms are fairly nondescript, so I don't really remember them. But next time I do a video, I'll do like the kitchen and what other rooms he discovers. Because like he said, and this is an interesting point to keep in mind, he, in his dream, is self-aware enough to realize this is a dream, I'm going to go upstairs. But he doesn't know what upstairs looks like because he's never been up there, right? So it'll be interesting to figure out once he goes up there, during the day and sees what the upstairs looks like and then goes back into dreaming at night, will it look the same? You know what I mean? Is he wandering the house in his dreams, or is he wandering it in real life in his dreams? So that's, I think, pretty much where we'll leave it this week, because I have to edit all of this tonight and get it uploading, and I'm tired and it's been a long day. So, and my selfie light's dying. Okay, well, let me know if you like this format better, if the video is a little clearer. Apparently the webcam and the phone camera record at the same FPS and resolution, but I don't think that can possibly be true. Either way, let me know. We will reconvene next week with chapter 5. 5? Yeah, chapter 5 of the Wells House Phenomenon. But until then, let's see if I can cover you up so that you don't see the pimples on the back of my neck when I stand up. Okay?